Last night I woke up because I had a tickle in my throat. Well, I hadn't quite fallen asleep yet. And at the same time, I had this heart pounding and sort of fear and sort of like this subtle fear of death at the same time. And it was really interesting. And I felt like writing down that death is a tickle in the back of the throat while falling asleep and getting used to it. It just felt like a very quick and subtle dying. But in a way, it could be good, because getting used to that daily death, as opposed to waiting for that big one to accumulate every 6.5 to 8.5 months, as it is for my internal process, it seems. Maybe it would be better to have just a small daily one than waiting for that big one. And I was talking in my last video about getting used to the cold turns off the shiver reflex, and I wonder if getting used to map consciousness or mania or higher states and fluxing states might turn off the shiver of psychosis. And interestingly enough, when I've had so-called psychosis, I usually do have a shiver response. And I also had a bit of a sense that that time when my consciousness left my body and went into a bird, and I was flying all over the place, and then it went into other things as well, but I had this thought that maybe my consciousness went into the bird to fly everywhere and see what's happening from the perspective of a bird. So in a way, I had this bird's eye view of the world, even though I don't remember seeing it. I just remember being the bird and the sensations of that. But I had this sense that the mind is trying to see through the brain. The one mind that makes up everything, the one consciousness. It sees through the birds, it sees through brains. The brain is sort of the physical apparatus that allows the mind to see itself and all aspects of itself. So by being a bird temporarily, consciousness was able to have a bird's eye view. And it seems that humanity has its own images of me and its own individual needs and desires and goals apart from the mind. And that actually blocks the mind from seeing itself. And it blocks the human from seeing itself as everything else, as connected and related in an aspect of the all. So I feel like in that experience, in a way, my consciousness died to this body temporarily. It left my body and went into a higher consciousness than even being a human being, which is a bird. Which maybe isn't even higher consciousness per se, it just is a different way of seeing. And one can see further what's happening in the world. Like a bird must kind of know there's something wrong when there's not enough trees for it to have a proper community of its own species and other bird species, etc. So the mind wants to see through the human brain, because the mind is seeing through the brain full of its own stuff, full of its own memories and experiences, which have nothing to do with nature. And we are nature. And it doesn't mean there's no place for human constructs, but by seeing through the mind, the human constructs would likely take their natural place. Because right now they're more expanding like cancer. Cancer destroys the body, and humanity is destroying its body, which is Earth. Earth is our real body. Without the Earth, we wouldn't have bodies. Maybe that's what's missing in terms of planets being inhabited, is that consciousness has to imbue the planet with consciousness in order for life to arise from that consciousness. And it's possible that other planets could have life on it, and we might be looking right at it, and we would still not be able to see it. Because we look at our planet and we can't even really fully be with the life that's on our planet. We can't really sense it. So if we can't fully sense the life here, how would we be able to sense the life on another planet? If we can't sense the life of a bird here and its importance, how would we even have the sensitivity to even sense other forms of life? We can't even see what's right in front of us. We can only see our own constructs. And so if we're looking for our own constructs on other planets, which have nothing to do with life, then we're never going to find it. For some reason, A Course in Miracles popped into my head, and I was thinking that map consciousness is sort of like A Course in Magic, which is similar to miracles. And I was also thinking that it's sort of like magic coursing through the body. It's sort of a course in being animated by that magic, which is just life. It's being animated by life as opposed to thought structures and patterns. It's being animated by the moment. And in a way, it's a different obstacle course. So normal consciousness has its ego thought structures as the obstacle course. It's trying to get past the obstacles that it itself has imposed upon itself, and by doing that it creates the self. It's not a very interesting game. There's a tiny spider on my phone. What are you doing? The obstacle is the ego, and the only real thing to do is just see past it. And that shouldn't be that difficult, because it's just this sort of illusion of thoughts and sounds and images. Just look at a real something and you're seeing past it. Looking without the word about the thing that one is looking at. And it could be that the obstacle of the game, I don't know if that's how you say that, the objective of the game. And it could be that the objective of the game is to live a life without the obstacle of the obstacle maker. I feel like if we're sensitive to these things, then life is rich, and we are rich, and we are richness. It's not just about the 9 senses, or 5 senses, depending on how you look at it. They all meld together, and then their flux and flow creates this infinite richness of sensing. So the 5 senses become sensitivity. And we speak as that sensitivity. It's not just about hearing and touch, it's understanding the whole language of all the senses together. And when we do that, we can actually understand the language of the sense impressions that we're getting in the moment, and speaking as that. We've narrowed life down to a few desires, wants, goals. So we have this very limited band of goals and desires, and we make life about seeking out that, which could be an infinitesimally small amount of the richness available in reality and in life. So we're looking for a needle in a haystack because we have this very selective thing that we're looking for. But if we're just looking, that which we're looking at impresses upon our sensitivity and gives us this sense of richness moment to moment. Not richness because of a certain thing. It's just a richness of being alive. But most of us don't feel alive because we're looking for a needle in a haystack. And we've been told that once we find that needle, we're going to be happy. When happiness is being sensitive to the richness of the moment, because it's so infinite. It's so infinite. Like yesterday, I was talking to my friend for 3 hours, and I was on the phone, but I noticed this pink blade of grass. And I kind of meant to take a picture of it, but I forgot. And then when I got back to inside, I thought, oh, I want to take a picture of that pink blade of grass. And I was telling someone about when I was manic, I was being all creative the very first time with knickknacks. And then I told him about, oh, I need to take a picture of a pink blade of grass. And he said, you're still the same as that, just in a different way. So it's still being sensitive to the relationships of things, just in a different context. And it's still very rich, but it's not as energizing as it first was because it was just such a new state to be in. And I still don't know what my consciousness would be like if I wasn't taking lithium, which seems to sort of keep me slowed down to some extent, weighted down by that heavy metal still attached to the earth. So just to notice a pink blade of grass. And that's the richness. The richness is of perception. And then it's always changing. There's always something new and different. And that's, again, the richness. Instead of always looking for the same kind of thing. When we're not looking for anything, infinite kinds of things can impress upon our sensitivities and speak to us in a different language. It's the language of sensitivity. It's the language of life. Instead of the language of me and what I want. What we might want is for there to be no me. And in this non-wanting state, we have everything. But in a way, it's hard to believe that that's true because if we watch TV, we see people with things and drama and all that, and we think, well, that's what happiness is. Because it's on TV and it's entertaining. And the people on TV must be happy because they're on TV and blah, blah. Like, it goes on like that. A show that just showed someone sitting there and then noticing a pink blade of grass and then going over and taking a picture of it would not be entertaining. Yet, to the one who's able to be in that state, it's infinitely rich in such ways that one would never watch TV. I was watching a TED Talk by someone named Aaron Bannock, and he was talking about how to be happy by not being your best self. And that resonates for sure, because I've talked about the importance of being one's best self, or that we get in touch with it in mania, but I also feel like I haven't yet rejoined with that best self that I was. but I also have the sense that I don't care, it doesn't matter. So I'm not yet that version of myself, and maybe I never will be. Maybe it'll be something different and better, and it's not even about better or worse. It's just about having that blueprint of how to be as a human being fully living in the moment. Yet it's important to actually not always be living fully in the moment, because one is around people that aren't living fully in the moment. So one has to sort of default to programs where those are necessary, and that's part of the process of intelligence as well. It's important for me to sort of default to the program of mental patients somewhat when I'm talking to a psychiatrist, not be like, oh, I'm living in the moment, let's go for coffee. Like, they would just think I'm crazy. So, but he said we can't describe feelings. So going for happiness when we can't describe it is kind of off. And I was thinking that with this sensitivity, when we're not thinking all the time, when we're just sensitive, we can't describe that sensitivity. It's a richness that we feel and sense and perceive, and we can give voice to some of it, but we can't fully describe it. So this richness that I'm maybe talking about, I can't really describe it, because if I tried to describe each rich moment, that would be impossible. But one knows when one's connected to it. So one might know when one's happy but can't really describe that. One knows when one is sensitive but can't really describe that. And when we first get connected to that sensitivity, we try to describe it in terms of the me, and we try to describe it in terms of desire and pleasure, pain, and all these ways we're used to describing things, yet that doesn't describe the richness, but that's the only language we know. So what I'm saying is, even to learn the language of sensitivity doesn't mean that a person can fully unfold the richness and sensitivity of each moment. That's impossible. So it's a language of the senses, it's a language of sensitivity. Not just the senses, it's not just I hear this, I see this. It's a sensitivity that is infinite within itself. And we talk about the sixth sense. It's kind of like the sixth sense, but the sixth sense is an infinite sense. It's sensing. It's when all the senses combine, plus the sixth sense. So the six senses, or I've even heard the nine senses, so it could be the 10th sense, they all meld together and they're fluxing. So sometimes four are active or infinite are active, and it's such a flow that you can't separate those things. And then you can't separate yourself from the sensitivity that you are. You can't separate yourself from nature. I feel like this sensitivity is the richness. And he drew a little diagram where he showed happening, thought, feeling, behavior. So then he was talking about controlling one's thoughts, which that's probably one of the most common notions in terms of happiness, is control your thoughts. And Krishnamurti would say the thinker is the thought. So it's just thought controlling thought. There is no separate me in there controlling the thought, because the me is thought. And trying to control it actually creates the me, because it's this center entity made up of thought. I might have just ate a bug, I don't know. So I drew another diagram, and I don't know if it's true, and it's just for fun to sort of compare it. I wrote happening, sensitivity, perception, action. And the reason it goes like that is because one needs sensitivity. Otherwise, one isn't going to have true perception. One is going to have deception. And thought is actually deception. And he gave an example of if a train announcement starts and says, the train's going to be late, then there's a thought interpretation of that. Now, one could hear the train's going to be late while looking at a flower pot that is on the platform and have no reaction at all to the fact that the train's going to be late. So what I'm saying is, if there's sensitivity, one could be sensitive to something else other than this announcement. And thoughts in our brain in a way are just announcements, and we're paying attention to them, and then we're judging our own announcements in our brain, our own thoughts. Who's judging that? There's no who there. It's just this associative process, and these associations create the me, because everything in the brain is associating everything to the me, in relation to me, and what that means for me and my day and my efficiency and blah blah blah. Meanwhile, there's flowers and trees and beautiful things that one could be looking at. So what I'm saying is, people don't question thought itself. And there can only be sensitivity when the brain is completely silent and quiet. Obviously, if one is going to have this richness of sensitivity of all the senses holistically receiving everything, there can't be noise as sound going on. That's going to mess up that algorithm of the beauty, of the flux, of the richness of sensitivity. And it's just this algorithm of me, blah, 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 blah. And it has nothing to do with anything. So I don't think thinking better thoughts, to feel better feelings, to behave better is anything to do with happiness. Happiness, if there is such a thing, is just seeing things clearly. Of course, people can't be happy when they're living according to their own associative deceptions, and that process is creating the illusion of this separate me. And it's not like there's no being or entity there, but that entity, that sensitivity, is being blocked by these sounds of the me, which is thought, going around in circles. So that's association, whereas when one is sensitive, the brain is more on the extrapolative, holographic, quantum processing state. We try to moderate feelings with thoughts, and to me, feelings are the result of thinking a similar thought many times, and that sort of gets congealed into a feeling complex. So then when one thinks that thought again, by picking out that bit of information from the infinity in front of oneself, then one has that feeling again, and one's just addicted to that feeling. And when one is addicted to personal feelings, one cannot be sensitive to the entire universe. One's only sensitive to oneself, the me, which isn't even real. It's just sounds about past experiences. And in a way, if we didn't have those sounds about past experiences saying that that's actually important, we'd probably just all walk off into the forest. So it's one of the things holding us to this crummy societal structure that we've all created to imprison each other with. I'm going to go back to the hummingbirds.